Hello, my name is Keith Richards. I'm the CEO of agileKRC, and I've decided to do this webinar with the mute button switched off because I think it's going to be a lot better. Sorry about the false start there, just being agile and adapting and responding to changes in circumstances. This webinar is entitled AgilePM, DSDM or PRINCE2 Agile, which one is the best for me? And I'm going to compare and contrast the two, but I'm also going to talk about projects in a sort of more wider, more general sense. So it doesn't matter whether you use these specific ones or you're looking to, I'm sure you're going to find the webinar very, very useful. Now, just a tiny point of admin for you to get the best from this webinar. You should somewhere on your desktop or somewhere on your phone, you should find some sort of red or orange button with an arrow on it. And this enables you to access the control panel. There's one area on the control panel that allows you to enter questions. It just says questions on it, so feel free to put in any questions if you're having any problems. And towards the end of the webinar, I'm going to take about 10 or 15 minutes questions. I'll warn you when the webinar is coming towards the end of the slides so that you can get your questions ready, and I'll do my best to answer them. So let's get going with the webinar. And first thing, I want to just give you a rough idea where we're going. We're going to start in an unusual place. We're going to look at what an Agile project actually is and what it isn't. And I think when we go through that, you're going to understand that sometimes we complicate things with Agile, and I'm going to try and simplify it so you can understand where you use Agile in a project context and where you just use it in what we call the BAU context. Trust me, there's not too many commercials on here. We keep it very light. We're just trying to give you content and help you on your sort of Agile journey. Now, in terms of an intro, you can read various things on there. I've been doing Agile for 20 years. Two of the main things I want to point out on that list really is the fact I was the lead author for PRINCE2 Agile only a few years ago, and also was lead author for DSDM back in 2006. So I'm very familiar with both of these project methodologies, and hopefully you'll benefit from the sort of comparing and contrasting that I'm going to try and do. Also won an award, written a book, and various things, but as I say, let's get going with a webinar. Now, first thing, is Agile project actually an oxymoron? I spend a lot of time listening to people talking of Agile projects and not Agile projects, and this is actually a very important point to get from the get-go. It might seem pedantic, but actually understanding that there's no sort of binary yes/no condition here, I think is going to help all organizations when they're looking to adopt Agile and improve how they're going about the use of Agile. Now, I know from looking at some of the people attending, and it's great to see so many regulars back, and I apologise for such a long delay. Unfortunately, we've got some guys from one of my favourite customers, which is Mars. They're not just my favourites because it's all free chocolates, but they did a lot of work on the PRINCE2 Agile product. And when I arrived at Mars about sort of 5 years ago, that's the company, not the planet, we did a load of work on sort of Agile suitability. You know, what is an Agile project? What is not an Agile project? And they'd had some consultants in before. They created very complicated spreadsheets, and you scored everything. And at the end of this, it was, yes, that one's an Agile project, and no, that one's a waterfall project. Now, I think this is inherently dangerous because Agile is many things. It's about collaboration, it's about prioritization, it's about empowerment, it's about frequent delivery, it's about managing features. There's so many things that make up Agile that it's very difficult to say, yes, this is Agile, no, this is not Agile. And the work we did at Mars was very much in terms of trying to get this idea that actually Agile is very much about how much or how little. You know, are we in a very Agile situation here, or a fairly Agile situation, or in fact, are we not in a good place for Agile at all? So the first thing I want to try and get across is this idea to see it like a spectrum, to see it as if you like a spectrum or a rainbow. And I'm often using my hand like this when I talk to customers. You know, are we very Agile here, fairly Agile, or a few dangers with Agile here? I wouldn't really go there if I was you. So never think yes or no. Never have 10 projects that are Agile and 28 that are waterfall. This is just not good for your organization. Now, again, it sounds pedantic, but what actually is an agile project? If there's an agile project, does that mean there's things that aren't agile? And like I'm saying, a lot of it is a matter of degree. And therefore, when I'm dealing with customers, I often refer to projects in an agile context or in an agile setting. Now, I appreciate that's a bit clunky, but as I say, when you start saying agile project, not agile project, I don't think it actually adds value. Again, another term, and I don't take this too seriously or get too hung up about it, but what actually is an agile project manager? Because whenever I hear someone say agile project manager, I assume they're good at standing on one leg or they do yoga, but project management is project management. It's totally about what the context is. So it could be in a waterfall context, you could be in a very agile context. It's just you start to play with different controls, you start to play with different thinking, but a lot of what you do is exactly the same as what you would do in either context. A lot of people who come on our training courses, they feel they've got to learn an awful lot of new stuff. It's as if they've got to get rid of all their 10 years of project management experience because they've got to learn the new thing. Well, the new thing is actually only an adjustment. Some of it is very different, but I would suggest, don't quote me on the number, but I would suggest that 80% is actually what you've been doing as a regular project manager. Now, some of the regulars are going to be familiar with this screen, but I've been doing this for a long time. Even this year, I've been to 3 customers and they find this sort of definition and clarification very, very useful. So what I want to make really, really clear is the difference between what I call a product environment and a project environment. So if you have, say, for example, an existing product or service, and it could be, in-house, it could be an external product, you've normally had it for a while and you've got lots and lots of things that need to be done. You could call it a backlog, you could call it a shopping list, but there's lots of things that you need to stick into the existing product. Now, if you're working in an agile way, you'll batch these up into time boxes or sprints, and every 2 or 4 weeks, you'll release a bit more and a bit more, and you'll evolve the product over time. Now, this is going on week after week, month after month, year after year, until one day you decide to retire the product. Now, the term I use for this is BAU, business as usual. It's routine, classically enhancements, it's relatively simple, and Scrum, which is the most famous and well-known agile method, is very, very good in this domain. It's the go-to method. You can advance to things like Kanban perhaps, but 90% of what you read in the Agile community is variants of Scrum, and it's brilliant at this idea of enhancing an existing product, moving more and more features into something. Analogy would be something like your DIY jobs where you live. You just do the next one on the list, the most important, the one with the most value. Now, when we move to a different environment, which is the project environment, this is a lot more tricky. Maybe we haven't got anything. Maybe we've got an idea. A lot of my customers at the moment are on major rewrites. And, if you're rewriting something from scratch, you can't just deliver feature. A single feature on its own just means nothing if you're working from scratch. So when you're in this situation, you have to really think hard about why you're doing it, what you're doing, how you're going to architect it, how we're going to deploy this. You have to make a lot of upfront decision making. Now, this upfront decision making, if you like, distinguishes what a project methodology is. So whether it's PRINCE2 Agile or whether it's AgilePM DSDM, we need to do some thinking up front. So this is what the 2 sort of yellow squares, rectangles are. They're saying we've got to do some thinking, maybe a little bit of thinking at first, then some pretty serious thinking, because at the end of that second box, if we're deciding to invest, if we're deciding to re-platform, if we're deciding to launch a new chocolate bar, we've got to have justification for it. We need to have done a business case, how are we architecting it, how are we ensuring quality's there. Now, a lot of this is sort of good old-fashioned project management. Now, sitting across the top of this is a layer of project management. Things that are difficult and complicated won't happen on their own. Whereas on the right-hand side of the diagram, you have this sort of BAU approach. And, if somebody says, I want to add a new, page to our website, people don't run around going, how the heck are we going to do that? Whereas if somebody says, we want to integrate this product with Facebook, or we want to include, GPS into it, then suddenly people are going, how are we going to do that? It's complicated, and this has to be run as a project, okay? Now, the yellow stuff and eventually sort of deploying it, and remember when you deploy in an agile environment, you're looking to deploy regularly, frequently and often, not just sort of one go when you lob it over the wall. Now, on top of that, if it's a project environment, you need something called governance. Now, that's not a particularly exciting word, but if you're investing 200K or 500K, you really need to look after where the money's going and make sure that the thing that comes out at the end is actually what you want. Now, this is where, for example, a project board or a steering committee would exist. And this, and I don't want to get too technical here, but this orange and yellow stuff is what makes a project a project. Now, sitting across the top of that could be a sort of strategic vision, product roadmap, program level. But the point I want to get across first is that left-hand side of the diagram is what I call the project environment, where projects are complicated, they're unique. You know, if you were doing one of them, you know, every sort of 6 weeks, it wouldn't be unique. It's temporary. You set them up, which is those first two upfront bits of work. You execute it, you shut it down. That's what a project is. Now, it needs to be managed. It just won't happen on its own. Now, this is where Scrum, which is, if you like, one of the most sort of well-known Agile methods, can't actually do all of that. It can't do the orange and yellow stuff. Now, that's not a limitation with Scrum. Scrum's not intended to do that. It can't do it. So if it can't do it, well, what are we going to do? Do we add things on? A lot in the Scrum community talk about Sprint Zero. Again, that does make some people's eyes water when you see what's actually in people's Sprint Zero. If you wanted to become a Scrum trainer, I'm exaggerating slightly, but you're not actually allowed to say Sprint Zero. And really, you're just reinventing the wheel, which is called upfront work, which you would have done on a sort of complicated, unique sort of project. Now, as I say, this might sit in a wider context where you've got lots of projects and lots of BAU work that's evolving your either internal systems or the product that maybe you've got in the marketplace. But the key thing, the key message about this diagram is Scrum is very good on the right-hand side. A lot of the Agile that you read and hear about is very good on the right-hand side. When you move over to the left-hand side, you've got to wrap it and integrate it with some sort of project management framework. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's PRINCE2 Agile, Agile DSDM, you know, at government digital services in the public sector in a few places in the UK, you know, they're using, you know, variants and flavors and different terminology here. But a project is basically a project that needs to be executed like that. Now, here's a very important thing to remember. You cannot manage a project with Scrum. You cannot run a project with Scrum alone. But you can use Scrum on a project quite happily. So in that green box, that's where the Scrum sort of work goes, because in that green box, you are delivering product. It's the product delivery area. So if you're evolving or delivering product, like things that you put together that make, I don't know, a lounge, a kitchen, dining room, you make a house, you know, that's what you're trying to build together when you're running a project. Now, in terms of going forward here, what we need to do is integrate Scrum or Agile or Kanban or this delivery style Agile. We need to integrate it in with a project management framework. And one of the most important things to do here is to blend, weave, integrate, sort of, you know, try and get these things to mix in together. What you must avoid doing is the idea of bolting on Agile to the bottom of your project management framework. Some pretty big consultancies, I won't mention their names because they're not here to defend themselves, but a lot of stuff that you see on LinkedIn about you know, a really great approach called water, scrum, fall. Well, my advice to you is run a mile. That makes absolutely no sense at all. You can't do sort of waterfall thinking, then do agile thinking, and then do sort of waterfall thinking. Well, you can, but I'm pretty certain you'll end up in some sort of mess. You know, it's going to get messy, and it's amazing that sort of, you know, mainline consultancies are allowed to talk about things like, as I say, water, scrum, fall, and agile, and all that sort of stuff. It just doesn't work. You've got to mix them, because what we've got to try to do is to get agile going up these layers. Now, remember I said about the orange and the yellow stuff on the earlier diagram. We've got to get agile stuff going up into there, and we've all got to be sort of running from the same sort of mixture. This is why I want you to be sort of looking at words like configure, tailor, integrate. It's that we're trying to do when we get our sort of project management approach and our agile approach going together. So as I say, the orange and yellow stuff needs to be agile too. And to try not to just be general here and give you some specifics, You know, the project board or your steering committee or steerco, they've got to understand Agile. They've got to know how it works and what it's doing. So a typically easy example would be to see what are they tracking. So if a project board are tracking, you know, with the project manager, they're tracking something like whether you're on schedule or not. Well, the answer is going to be yes, because we're time boxing. So saying are we on schedule shows you don't actually understand what Agile is. Asking whether we're delivering what we plan to deliver, namely, you know, have we delivered 95% of what we planned, which would be okay. But if we've only delivered 50% of what we planned, then that's not okay. So do the project board actually understand what's going on here? So again, with those layers, if in the previous diagram, the green box was your delivery layer, what's going on in this sort of the yellow and the orange layers there? Do they get what they're talking about? I just want to give you one other quick example. This would be very advanced and quite unusual, but can the project board actually come into, for example, a project room and pull the information out of the project room by just looking at burn down charts? So this concept of pull is a very agile idea. You just come in, look at the charts, they seem okay, you know, you walk out. You know, that's not quite the monthly sort of status meeting. So that would be an example of a project board that gets it. And I spend a lot of time with organizations, and often the delivery layer gets it, and it's trying to get to the PMs get it, you know, to the executive level get it. And when everyone gets it and you all understand how the mixture blends and weaves together, you know, then you're in a very, very good place. Now, one thing I just want to elaborate on that I said earlier, how different is being an agile project manager or a project manager in an agile context compared to traditional project management. And the key thing there is you still need to plan, you still need to manage risks, you still need to you know, identify and track issues, you still need to report, you still need to schedule work and synchronize work. So a lot of it is still the same. It's just, if you like, the big differences are we're playing much more with features. You know, it's if you like a different concept there, and we're very much iterative and incremental. We're not talking about technical phases that you might find in the waterfall, for example, analysis, design, build, etc. So it's a little bit different. It's significantly different, but it's not like chalk and cheese. It's you know, it's an adjustment, and this is why when you hear, and I'm sorry to be a bit black and white on this, but when you hear the nonsense that project managers can't be Scrum Masters and Scrum Masters can't be project managers, you know, it doesn't really help the debate. It's there's a big overlap here. Now let's have a look at the two approaches that we're talking about. The first one I want to mention is AgilePM DSDM. So let's just go through what that is. That was created in 1995, a long time ago, and it was just about dead in 2006. No public training going on whatsoever. Oh, in fact, there was one company that was out. But in 2006, it was more or less dead on its feet. And I volunteered to have a go at rewriting it. And that was 15 months of very hard work, but out came something that was quite good. And in the last year, 16,000 plus exams have been taken in 2017. And over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, that figure has been just increasing very, very steadily, and you know, I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be 25,000 in 2018. It's the most sort of well-known exam in terms of project management, so a great success story there for AgilePM DSDM. Now, DSDM has been around since 1995. It stands for Dynamic Systems Development Method. So systems development, if you like, showing its heritage there. And it's trying to move on from that, and with a big rebranding that's gone on now. So it's called the Agile Business Consortium. Now, if you've got a book like the one in the top right-hand corner with DSDM Consortium and the red swoosh thing, it's still up to date, so don't burn it. And if you're on an exam course, it's still completely valid. It's just the cover is not updated, and the rebranding, and I'll show you what the rebranded version looks like now. It's the same book, but it's just a little bit different. It's just rebranding. There's nothing changed with the method. Now, in the method, in the bottom right-hand corner there, you can see something called the Greek temple diagram. And this is actually, if you like, an aerial view of the whole method. The top, if you like, the blue parts, the roof of the Greek temple, if you like, is very much the pink and fluffy stuff. I mean, if I don't know how blue stuff can be pink and fluffy, but if you know what I mean, it's the behaviour stuff, the attitude, ethos stuff. Whereas the green pillars are much more the mechanical, not so exciting stuff, but still very important. So in DSGM, AgilePM, you'll find there's a process. You'll find certain phases you've got to go through. There's a people aspect, and by that I mean there's roles and responsibilities, who does what. There's also products that are produced, certain documents that come out at a certain time. Don't necessarily need to be documents, but as I say, you can see it's a bit more, not particularly exciting, but it's mechanical, and every methodology or framework needs to have these sort of elements. Now, the fourth pillar there is practices, if you like. It's a collection of techniques. There aren't many in DSGM. There's a handful, things like Moscow or facilitated workshops, but there's some techniques that are actually there in the method. Now, if you want to know more, there's the website, agilebusiness.org. And the great news is, because of all the success with what's going on with AgilePM and DSGM at the moment, they are investing in a lot of what I would call collateral. There's something called an Agile sort of dojo being set up, information videos. Now, this is early days, but what is happening at the ABC is they're now trying to, if you like, support the community and grow Agile in a much wider space. Not just have a sort of book and an exam. This is fast-moving water, and I'd thoroughly recommend you engage with the Agile Business Consortium. There's membership, there's lots of events you can go to. It's a very active community at the moment, and and more power to its elbow. Now, in terms of advantages, it's been around quite a while, and it is quite staggering that actually this was invented in 1995, so far ahead of its time that perhaps that was one of the reasons why it didn't grow so well. It was so far ahead of its time. The business model chosen, everyone was going open source, and they decided to go closed shop, which didn't work. But if you like, the engine room, the mechanics underneath it are still valid to this day. And the big two are time boxing and Moscow. Back in the late 90s, this was revolutionary. No one had really thought of working this way. Not huge communities anyway. And just to name check, a guy called Clegg, he invented the sort of Moscow system, and still used today. Very powerful. Just a quick advice on Moscow: it's for projects. You can't really use it in the sort of Scrum area where you just do the most important thing first. But Moscow's very, very good when you have dependencies, functional groups. It's easy to sort of learn within minutes, but it does take quite a while to master. There's always, everything's a must, or let's do all the musts first, but that's never ever the case. Moscow, incredibly powerful tool, and well done, Clegg, for inventing it. One of the best bits, in my opinion, of DSGM is the roles and responsibilities. It's got brilliant coverage of the customer roles. I find the product owner concept on that sort of right-hand side of that early diagram with Scrum far too simplistic when you move into the project domain. When you have a project, it's actually very hard to work out who the product owner is. It's not a simple transition. And there's, if you like, 4 different types of what I would call customer or business role in DSGM. And I think this different levels of high-level role, low-level role, peripheral roles, it just works superbly well. And it's been there from day one. And if you're in the project context, and that's very important to make that differentiation, because if you're not in a if you're not in a project context, you're in a product context, you just need a product owner, and hey ho, off you go. But projects are complicated, and therefore our engagement with the customer or the business is quite engagement. It's important to get right. The 8 principles, I think, are I think they've really stood the test of time. I led the team that created those, and I was only training them last week, and I just was thinking to myself, actually, these are still true. These are still relevant. The trick, or the problem with things like principles, is everyone sort of says them and assumes they're going to happen automatically. Well, they don't. You have to make them happen. You have to, if you're a project manager, you have to catch them if they're going wrong, and you have to do something about it. And this is what separates the good project managers from the average. if you see collaboration breaking down, which is one of the DSDM principles, it's very easy to spot it. It's what are you going to do about it? And it's tough. And this is why some of the happy clappy advice you get in Agile doesn't stack up when you're doing what I would call corporate strength Agile. But I think the principles are absolutely superb, but they have to be managed. They have to happen. And if any of those are going to amber or red, you've got to step in because you're taking on damage. The two triangles, which is basically about let's play around with features as opposed to time and cost. That was in the first version in 1995 and is a very simplistic way of explaining things and gets the message across quite well. One thing I particularly like, which I think the current technical director put in, is splitting out the project into what I would call three sort of views. There's a business angle, a technical angle, and a management angle. And by management, I mean project management. I don't mean the management. And separating out your documentation and your roles into those makes things a lot easier for things like sign off, who the audience is. And you're trying to bring those three things together on a project, and splitting them out and making them much more clearer, I think is really good. You've got someone who wants it, someone who's building it, and you got someone who's going to make the thing happen. So another great thing about DSDM is actually the delivery team level is quite natural and is well defined. I'll come on to PRINCE2 Agile in a moment. It gets a bit clunky there, and I think things like the business ambassador and these small teams, I think it does that. It does it quite naturally, and as I say, I think it's a pretty good. It's pretty good in that area. These are, if you like, the advantages. Okay. Now, what about the disadvantages? And before I go any further, I want to say that these are, like I would call, irritations and annoyances. There's nothing really cataclysmically wrong here. It's not. We're not looking at a wounded animal here. There's just things that really haven't stood the test of time, and really, if it was rewritten tomorrow, a lot of this would change instantly. It is somewhat dated. A lot of the information in there is around 2011, 2012. No mention of things like minimum viable product, Kanban, flow, that sort of stuff. It's lean startup. It's not in there. I guess the attitude is, well, it ain't broke, don't fix it. We're still selling, but plenty of times maybe it should have been updated a bit. And I think if it was updated tomorrow, there'd be some big changes. Very light on the techniques. There's only a handful. It doesn't really go into much detail on some of the key techniques that are around there. If you like, it's sort of saying, well, go and get the techniques off the internet if you like, but in a sense, it's missed an opportunity there to be a one-stop shop. The products guidance is a bit tricky. It's always been a problem with DSDM, the products. I think there's 55 at one point, but there's always been a problem in this area, and you've got to sort of look behind it and look through it and look carefully at it. And it's some of the guidance is almost saying, do what you want, which I don't think is particularly helpful when you're in a big organization. I can't see you'd ever run a project without a business case. I can't see you'd ever not consider architecture. I think you always need to do the products. It's just how much. Now, one of the customers, I was only with them this week, actually. They've been a DSDM shop for a long time, and they've got this whole documentation thing down to, about 5, 6, 7 pages. They're even trying to automate it now by putting it into, VSTS, TFS, whatever you will, and trying to make it so that actually you can produce it. It's not even a paper sort of document. But again, they're not missing any of them out. They do them all. It's just they've made it very light and very effective. So, people might change their minds or disagree on that one, but as I say, it's a little bit of a tough area, the products. There's some legacy issues, and again, this is the irritation and the slightly dated thing. There's almost like a friendly artifact that some of the DSDM community like, called the structured time box. You'll never find it. Well, you might find it if you look hard enough, but you might find a unicorn if you look hard enough. You won't really find it in the real world. It doesn't work like it's described. It's something that goes back, if you like, to the late 90s. The important thing, though, is if you're in an exam, you will need to nail that and do exactly what it says in the manual. The fact it's aimed at business systems, again, I think if you went back to the late 90s, a lot of IT stuff was being written for the business, over the corridor, and you have to get through some of the terminology and the names there. Do you swap business to customer? It's not quite that simple. Now, remember, a lot of suppliers are using this. They you know, for product, for customers, customer-supplier relationships. You've got some people just developing product, and they don't even see themselves as, say, I don't know, the NHS or the MOD. You know, they don't see themselves as businesses. Some of the diagrams, yeah, it's not standing the test of time, but that's because of evolution. Long time ago, there used to be a thing called the cheese and three pizzas, but over time, these pizzas have been removed, and you know, the diagrams, if you like, sometimes they'd be much better if they're drawn in a different way. And I think, you know, if there was a rewrite, these would change, but these are just irritations and nothing particularly major. Now, just before I move on to looking at PRINCE2 Agile, I have a quiz question for you, and you can have a go at trying to answer this. We get feedback that people like these trivia quizzes. Earlier on, you saw a picture from the TV program Rainbow. Can you name the bear that was in Rainbow? So if you put that in your question box, maybe I'll give a name check for the first one to name the bear. If you can name the other two characters as well, that would be cool as well. So that's your trivia question for today. Now we're going to look at PRINCE2 Agile. This was created, PRINCE2 was created in 1996. You could say it was created earlier if you look at Prince and prompt, but it's been around for ages. About 1 million people have taken exams in it worldwide. It's in a gazillion languages, etc., etc. It's very much an established framework, sort of worldwide framework. It's apparently the most used framework in the world, and I think you might need to then debate what the term framework actually means, but that is the claim that sort of Axilos make anyway. PRINCE2 Agile was created in 2015. Again, lead author, again, a big team, 30, 40 people, again, a lot of hard work. And, you know, when you lead author, it's something you think, I'm never doing that twice, but I've managed to do it twice, but there won't be a third time, I can assure you. It's really hard work. It's very enjoyable, but it is hard work. It's a bit like putting unleaded petrol into a diesel car. It's the sort of thing that you might do once, but you'd never do twice. Although I have actually done that twice. It's actually owned by Axilos. They are the company jointly owned with, I think, the Cabinet Office. They look after, they are like the guardians of PRINCE2 Agile. And the Examination Institute, or EI, is actually called PeopleCert. Now, that's very new. As of sort of January the 1st, there were several exam institutes last year, but just to get you used to the names, if you want to look them up on the web, Axilos, if you like, own PRINCE2 Agile, also things like ITIL and MSP, but the examination accreditation body is actually PeopleCert. Now, sorry I keep diving off. I'm trying to make sure I'm on time. I mean, Agile's about being on time, so I don't really want to be late. So just a bit more. What is good about PRINCE2 Agile? It's very current, very up to date. It has got things in there all about sort of Kanban, MVP, flow, and some pretty interesting modern stuff that's happening in the Agile space. There's something called Cynefin. It's spelled with a C, and it's a Welsh word. And if you've got nothing to do this afternoon, take a look at that for 20 minutes. It's pretty interesting stuff. And it builds on the existing PRINCE2 framework. So you haven't got to bring in a brand new project management sort of approach. You just build it on PRINCE2. But that is predicated on the fact that you would have PRINCE2. It's very comprehensive. It's got about 35 to 40 techniques in there. It goes into quite a bit of detail. The Scrum guide's in there, all 15 pages of the Scrum guide. I don't know, half a dozen pages on Kanban, Lean Startup. It really does go into a lot of detail on Agile as it is, if you like, today. One of the hardest bits is specific guidance on integration with Scrum. This is actually very difficult. It's not blindingly hard, but it's just not easy. How you relate a project manager to a Scrum Master is tricky. And we give in that guidance a full ways of integrating with Scrum. Now, if you take AgilePM DSDM, for example, it sort of says, you know, Scrum goes in here. And in some senses, you know, that doesn't help you. It doesn't say, how do I integrate it? But in other senses, you're clear where you stand. It's a bit like Scrum saying, we don't deal with projects. At least you know clearly where you stand and you know where it goes in. But be very careful here. These mappings of product owner to, the business and customer roles, mapping Scrum Master to project manager and team leader. It's fraught with all sorts of nuances that you've got to steer very carefully through. I mean, for a start, are we talking about a mature Scrum team or an immature Scrum team? This affects how you actually tailor your project management framework that you might be sitting around Scrum. There's certain things called focus areas, though we look at things like requirements in detail. We don't just say Moscow, you have to go a lot further. User stories, a classic agile technique that everyone says, oh, write a user story. Give it to the project manager, give it to the product owner, write some user stories. Very easy to say, very hard to write really good user stories. My favorite user story of all time was out in India, where they had a user story and I'm in a room with 15 developers trying to code from it, and it says, as a branch manager, I want to manage the branch so the branch is managed effectively. Now, that's a really good example of you've written a user story, but it's not actually written that well. So a lot of guidance on how to write things like user stories and acceptance criteria as well. Something called the Agileometer. Again, I'll name check the Mars guys here, and there's a guy called Matt Perkins who's left now, but really good work that they did on the Agileometer. We get a lot of great feedback on the Agileometer. Not everybody likes the name, but a lot of good feedback on the Agileometer. And this is the risk assessment for how you do Agile in a project context. Now, it doesn't matter what project framework you're doing, your own, build your own, hybrid, whatever, but you should in those early days or those early stages, look at the Agile conditions and what are the risks here, where is Agile going to help us, what do we need to be careful with. It's like a risk assessment for the approach you're taking. It's almost like before you start on a journey, doing a risk assessment of what do we need to take in the car. Now, most project frameworks don't have that. They have checklists, but they don't have a sort of an Agile checklist to say, look, how Agile can we be? And remember the thing I was saying earlier about the rainbow and the spectrum, how Agile can we be? Now, in DSTM AgilePM, they have something similar called the PAQ, the Project Approach Questionnaire. It's 20 odd questions, you go through them, and again, it's a risk assessment. What are the bits that we need to look out for? A good example, a good question is, how much business engagement or how much customer engagement are we going to get on this project? Now, if the answer is not much, you're opening up a big Agile risk. Ironically, if you ran it waterfall, traditionally, actually, just get them to sign it off and we'll build what they've signed off. So if you swap the risks, there's a different set of risks with an Agile sort of style project compared to traditional. There's a lot of people in the Agile community that think that Agile gets rid of all risks. I've literally looked into the eyes of someone saying, if you do Agile properly, there's no risks. Again, I think, don't want to be too harsh, but I think that's deluding yourself. You've got different risks, and this is where the Agileometer or the PAQ in AgilePM DSTM are very powerful, very, very useful. Again, the customer I was with a couple of weeks ago, they're a DSTM shop again. They've been using the PAQ for a long time, but they've now got that down to 12 questions, and they've that's what works for them. A couple of new ones in, and some questions weren't relevant. You need to tune these your PAQ or your Agileometer if you're using them. Now, what's the disadvantages with PRINCE2 Agile? In a word, one of the biggest disadvantages is actually the word PRINCE2. A lot of people think it was created by the devil. They've had bad experiences with it. They see it as a waterfall approach, bureaucratic, command and control. But the truth is, it's only that way if you run it that way. Let's say you've been trained badly, or you've just got inexperienced project managers who didn't quite get it. There's nothing in PRINCE2 to say you do any of those things. Now, the issue there, it's a bit like sushi. Most people think that sushi is raw fish. That's not actually true, but if everyone believes it, then okay, maybe that's where we are, and that's how we have to go with it. I think Axelos will be the first to admit that in 2015 it was launched not particularly well. It was poorly launched, but I'm in touch with Axelos, do a lot of work with Axelos at the moment, and sort of new people have come in with, if you like, a slightly different mindset, and I know that there's a layer and a group of people in there that are very impressive at the moment, and I think you'll find that PRINCE2 Agile is in very safe hands at the moment with Axelos. The delivery team guidance is probably the tricky bit. There's probably quite a few PRINCE2 Agile trainers who, when you get to the end of the first day and you're training the delivery team thing, it's not that easy because there's so many tricky areas there. And I've got to put my hand up here. I think as lead author, some of the things that I was trying to do didn't quite work as well as I'd hoped. So whereas the AgilePM DSDM delivery team guidance is really nice and clean and really, really simple. Sometimes you can overthink things, you know what I mean? I'm guilty of that a few times. The big issue with PRINCE2 Agile, which frustrates trainers and a lot of people, is this idea about, a lot of it is about rules, but a lot of it is about guidance. And there are times when you need a rule. I mean, for example, you must wear a safety belt. In Moscow, a must means, it won't work without it. Now these are black and white rules, and they're great. But the trouble with Agile and the trouble with projects is they're complicated things. You might have geographically dispersed teams. You might have a customer you love. You might have a customer you hate. And there's all different contexts. And therefore, what the guidance in PRINCE2 Agile often talks about is you may do this, or you should do this, or typically you do this. And it's very hard to class that as a rule. So simple example is things like co-location. Wouldn't it be great if we're all in the same room? And wouldn't it be great if we're tracking progress on a burn down chart that's stuck on the wall? So, make plans visible, stick them on the wall, brilliant. But you can't really say that is how you have to do it. And you can't say if you're not doing that, you're not agile. If you're dealing with, say, a UK-India situation, what are we going to do? Now, it's not that you can't do it. You just have to do it in a slightly different way. Okay, you can use webcams, you can use collaboration software, but the bottom line is you can't just say stick the business person in the room, stick the customer in the room, and off you go. Hey ho, it's not possible. So what do you do? Do you pick up your ball and go home, or do you adjust and try and do the best and actually mitigate the risks, mitigate the downsides that are going to happen here? And this is why you can't put rules in those situations. You have to give guidance and advice and give options. Now, that's quite hard to examine on, because and actually in the PRINCE2 Agile exam, there's an awful lot of you got this situation, what would you do? And we're trying to test you on whether you actually are using the right sort of attitude. If you're trying to set up a meeting, you wouldn't run a workshop, but that might be a better way of communicating. So this guidance area against rules is tricky and quite challenging. And when you're training this, you have to start to be very clear about what those differences are. Now, how to choose what's the right one for you? Now, the great news is both are excellent products and both will help you. So whichever you choose, whatever you do, don't sort of hesitate and don't choose one. As long as you choose one of them, you're going to be fine. They're both, battle hardened, proven. That they're genuine sort of proper products. So don't be worried about picking the wrong one. Just make sure you pick one. Great thing about live webinars is we sometimes have people collect parcels. Don't worry, I'll edit that out later. So one of the big things here is if you've got PRINCE2, then this is really simple. If you're a PRINCE2 shop, you're using PRINCE2, then go PRINCE2 Agile. There's no point learning another set of language and another set of terms and phrases and for essentially the same sort of thing. Now, if you're in a place where PRINCE2's got a bad name, it's caused chaos, people hate it, and they're running to Agile like crazy for, Brave New World, I wouldn't swim against the tide, to be honest. I'd probably go, down an AgilePM DSDM route. It might just be too much hard work to try and, realign people. So just bring in a fresh broom and go down that sort of route. The quickest and easiest route, because you will need the PRINCE2 prerequisite at the moment, the quickest and easiest route is go AgilePM DSDM. If you're a contractor, you want to get something quick on your CV, go down the AgilePM DSDM route. It's not necessarily cheaper, not necessarily more expensive. It's just in terms of days spent in a training room, days to get to, say, practitioner level, that's your quickest and easiest route. The most well-known qualification at the moment, 2018, is AgilePM DSDM. If you say, Agile Project Management, AgilePM on a CV, lots and lots and lots of people, recruiters, organisations, they're all going to know what it is. It's a well-known product. I wouldn't have said that 5 years ago because it was on the nursery slopes. Now that's in effect where PRINCE2 Agile is. It's on the nursery slope. So people are going to recognise the term PRINCE2. Now remember, they're going to sit there and go, oh, I like PRINCE2 or I hate it, or somewhere in between. But they will recognise PRINCE2 and PRINCE2 Agile. They probably won't necessarily recognise the product. It depends. Now the most reach, so I couldn't think of a better word, but reach is because if you're piggybacking PRINCE2 with its worldwide presence and public sector and big organisations, then PRINCE2 Agile is, if you like, the one with the most reach. Now I know I might be confusing you, not helping you here, but the main thing is you can't really make a mistake here as long as you use a bit of common sense. And it's not a question of if you go down one route, you really have messed up. It's a question of you got to look at your situation. If you're doing a lot of public sector and it's PRINCE2, yeah, go down that route. If you'd want to go quickly, use AgilePM DSDM. Now, it might be you want to train up in both or look at both and combine flavors, and that's just showing you're pooling the best practice and the best from both. All I'm saying is you can't do both at the same time. It just doesn't make sense. Now, things are moving. Things are happening quite a lot at the moment in the marketplace here. And to be clear, these are rival products. They compete with each other. Both organisations are, looking over the net, as it were, at the other person. They are just competitive products, and they're fighting for the same space. But these two organisations, Axelos and the Agile Business Consortium, are not standing still. They are doing an awful lot of work to improve their products, promote their products, and and that's for the benefit of everyone. Changes this year, I'm under NDA on certain things, so I'm just going to give you gossip, and this is all out there on LinkedIn and things, so everyone knows about this. Things like whether AgilePM DSDM is going to get rewritten. I've heard, yeah, Q1 this year, Q4 this year. No, it's not. But certainly, people are talking about a rewrite. Like I said, it's a bit dated, and when that happens, I haven't got a clue, but I just know that things that are happening in PRINCE2 Agile are making AgilePM DSDM community think, well, hang on, we better up our game a bit. One powerful area that AgilePM DSDM is already prototyping and experimenting with is working in the sort of government sector in the UK. So going in with government digital services, running sort of test sessions, very agile, running beta sessions. That's moving, that is happening, and the sort of so if you're in the public sector, you've got an interesting one, because you either just use, GDS straight out, and you can look that stuff up on the web. It's very accessible. So yeah, you can go down the GDS route. You can start looking at AgilePM DSDM in combination with it. But you could also build on your PRINCE2 knowledge if you're in the public sector. But whatever you do, don't sort of throw any of these away. You haven't got to sweep loads of stuff out and relearn everything. Now, PRINCE2 Agile, I'm hearing there's a new push. I don't know what that is, but there's a lot of realignment behind things. And you've got a picture there of Nadal and Federer, and I think the analogy is quite good. I think Roger Federer was just winning everything and was almost getting lazy because it was so easy to win everything, maybe a bit like DSDM. Then along came Nadal and started to win things, and it just pushed them both to new higher levels. So I think we're all benefiting here, as long as things like exams don't turn into sort of money-making machines and we get disenfranchised by the Agile community. As long as the products are good, the exams are good, and the two sort of things sort of fight with each other, I think everybody benefits, and there's just plenty of room for both products in the market. Agile's here for the next 5 or 10 years, no problem at all. The project manager's here for the next 5 or 10 years, no problem at all. Despite what you hear people saying, we don't have projects anymore, we don't need projects anymore. Well, that assumes you can do everything with the BAU approach, which you actually can't. The other day I saw a little post-it with GDPR on it in a backlog, and it'd be very interesting to see what happens when that gets to the top of the backlog. There could be a few people quite excited, because that is not a tiny piece of work. So personally, I think it's quite exciting because I work in that domain, but maybe you'd rather, I don't know, watch those guys play tennis, to be honest. Just going to check my timings again. We got time for some questions. So I just want to quickly tell you that what agileKRC can do. So get your questions into the question box. I'm seeing quite a few coming through at the moment. So only a quick commercial, but we actually do both products, as you're aware. We've got a very long-running Agile PM schedule. I think we're possibly the longest on the planet. Might be one that could claim longer, I don't know. But we even go back to the DSDM Foundation when that was public scheduled as well. We do PRINCE2 Agile as well. And commercial over, I just want to tell you about some free collateral we got for you that you might find very interesting if you're looking to pass these exams. We have an Agile PM video on how to pass the exam, and we also can get access to a PRINCE2 Agile video on how to pass that exam. Now, this is actually happening right now, so it's being edited. If you send us an email, we will send you the information. And if you mention this webinar, just say it was the one with Federer and Nadal in it, and yeah, we will get you that sort of stuff. But we've got videos on how to pass these exams. It's not like 2 minutes; they're quite long. It's got me in it, but you know, bear with it. Some of the information up there are pass rates. Just leave that there. I'm pretty pleased with those, and gives you an idea also that the PRINCE2 Agile exam is a lot harder. And again, that's something you might want to consider. If you just want to get the badge, get on, you'd be better going down the Agile PM route. However, if you think, hang on, you know, I reckon I can do that, you know, an 80% pass rate, you know, 4 out of 5 people get through. Our pass rates are quite a bit higher. You know, if you think you know your onions, then you might want to go down that route. No problem at all. So some information there. I'm just going to leave that on the screen, and I'm going to start looking at the questions now. We got a YouTube channel, by the way, and on that there is something about how to map Scrum Master to Project Manager. So you might want to have a look at that on our YouTube channel. We've got a LinkedIn group, and I've got a name of someone here. Where is it? She's called Justine, and I've just lost it. Justine Markey, she's from Paris, and she's our 2,500th joiner to the Agile Projects Forum on LinkedIn. So we've got 2,500 there. It's not Facebook, but it's a start. Okay, and some dates there. The next Agile PM course, and we got a discount there, and the PRINCE2 Agile course, we've got a discount there. We do limit our courses to only 12 delegates, and if you want to get a group trained, contact us. Commercial over. Let's have a look at the questions. I now need to go and grab them, and we will do questions up to, let me see if I can put it on here. Is that coming on the screen? Are we okay? Right. Let's have a look. John, can we call Agile project management a simultaneous sequence of multiple waterfall methodology? That's a brilliant question. The short answer is actually yes. When we train Agile, we actually say you still need to do analysis, design, build, whatever. You still need to do the technical work. It's just there, if you like, lots and lots of mini waterfalls. And these waterfalls could be lasting a day or 2 days or 3 days. Now, you've used the word simultaneous there, John. Being a little bit pedantic, I would use the word overlapping. But if you get in a time box, these overlapping, if you like, feature builds, you could just say they're mini waterfalls. And yeah, so I'm broadly in agreement with what you're saying there. There's a little bit more to it, but in essence, what I think your question is getting across that, yeah, I'm okay with that. So simultaneous sequence of multiple waterfall methodology. Yeah, broadly speaking, I'm okay with what you're saying there. How well known, this is from Anne, how well known is Agile PM DSDM outside UK? It's not that well known in Denmark. Funnily enough, this goes area by area. I happen to know Denmark quite well, done in a few things over there. And yeah, I think if I'm PRINCE2 is more known in Denmark. But if you go to something like Poland, or Holland, you're going to find that actually Agile PM DSDM is, yeah, it's doing really well. There's pockets. I think there's quite a big pocket in Australia actually. It's just a question of whether you've gone public sector. It's a question of what you've actually come across. So I think this is why I'm saying there's plenty to go around on both methods. even though AgilePM DSTM is selling in the thousands, in the tens of thousands, you know, it's still nothing anywhere near, if you like, what the Scrum community have achieved. But as we go through the next 5 or 10 years, and as we start to apply Agile in more complicated situations, I think you're going to find the need for running projects in an Agile context, you know, really, are really important. There's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. I hear, you know, 50% of Agile projects are rubbish and Agile's killed my company and all that sort of nonsense. That's actually people doing Agile badly. I read an article on how Scrum killed an organization, and you know, this thing got like 500-600 likes. Well, Scrum's killed nothing. People doing Scrum badly would have killed an organization, and this is why your project management role isn't going anywhere. You know, it's here to stay, and if you can get trained up in this, and if you can bring it into your organization correctly and run projects well, and remember that diagram earlier about the left and the right side, you know, don't put a project framework around something simple, but equally don't run something simple, don't run something complicated with a simple framework like Scrum. It's using horses for courses. I often use the analogy of a spoon and a fork. You know, if you're eating spaghetti, use a fork. If you're eating soup, you know, use a spoon. If you're eating soup with a fork, you know, that's not the fault of the fork. That's the problem, the organisation that's actually holding it. Take your point there, and I think you find country by country, you know, you just have to look at it on its own merits. But both are growing in both countries, and I know there's stuff going on in Denmark in both. What have we got here? Josh Pell. Hi Keith, what are your thoughts on SAFe? Unfortunately, that's another webinar, I'm afraid. To me, very simply, SAFe to me is again, it's like the fork and the spoon. It does a certain job. Personally, I think it does the job very well, but it's massive IT for me. It's massive organisations, like hundreds, if not thousands. Again, people will say that's not the case, but that's my view. And it's IT, and IT. People are saying they're trying to change it, but everywhere you go on the website, it's IT. And some of the stuff in there is quite powerful, like the release train stuff. I think is quite impressive. But the catch and the bit that I always try and advise people is I see many people looking at SAFe and they can't even get Scrum to work. Now, if you, using the old ice skating analogy, if you can't skate forwards and backwards, then there's no point trying to try somersaults. SAFe is for massive, huge Agile, and you need to do the stepping stones before you get there. But I can't say there's anything wrong with it, because it's what you use it on and how you apply it. The guy who invented that, Dean Leffingwell, you know, very astute business person, got the tool vendors on board. Very and it's got penetration and it's recognised. So you know, go carefully there. Try to walk before you run. Who else have I got here? I'm just trying to look at the green ones. How do you think you get everyone in the department to think Agile, particularly with individuals with over 20 years experience in their waterfall environment? I'm not going to mention your name on that one, but thank you very much for the question. This is probably the $64,000 question with Agile. It really is all about culture. Can you change the mindset? And the way we do it at agileKRC, we go into organizations and we look where they are. And if we think, oh, crocky, there's a lot of, you know, old ways of thinking here, you know, we look at how easy we can change it. But the biggest single bit of advice I'd give to you is do not go in and try and sell Agile. Do not evangelize about Agile. You'll just get their backs up. The way to go in is to see what problems people are having and then see if Agile can solve it. Very interestingly, we do a lot of this at agileKRC. We go into companies, we see what the problems are, and I would say half of the problems we've got are actually things like project management problems. It's nothing to do with Agile. And what we then sort of do is say, look, you need to tighten up your project management here. You need to sort out, I don't know, your requirements gathering there. And Agile can help you with this, this, and this. So, for example, being on time and handling changing requirements. But the simple answer to that question there is educate and inform. And, you know, we've got to be very careful not to be prejudiced here. You know, that it's a question of really what makes sense, and just because somebody might be, I don't know, quite senior, doesn't mean to say they're stuck in their ways. I would go the other way. I would say actually they've got a lot of experience, and you know, experience from failing or whatever. You try and engage and try and listen. Have to be honest and say if you're completely you know, just stuck in the past, then that's a completely different problem altogether. So educate and inform, because Agile is the way. It's just a question of how much, how you do it, and doing it in the right way. Right, I'm going to mention just a couple of things. I'm going to overrun slightly. I appreciate we're going to lose some people here, but I'm just going to overrun for 2 or 3 minutes just to see if I can catch another couple. I've got a really nice one here. Jeff has said, I haven't mentioned Sham 69 yet. Well, there you go. And remember, Sham 69, keep it simple. You know, 3 chords, 2.5 minutes, and move on with another song. Very much an Agile sort of philosophy there. Let me just try and see if I can just grab one more question before I go. Tony is saying, can Scrum trainers be influenced to stop saying projects are dead? We have Scrum trainers work for us, and we just check that they are what we call, you know, dialed in and clued up. And if we get a Scrum zealot, we don't tend to use them. We like the Scrum trainers who understand that Scrum is very good at doing what Scrum's good at, but there are times, customer supplier situation, for example, there are times when it's a project and you need to do things around it, and that's the sort of people we like. I think the big thing, Tony, and I am quite passionate about this, and I'm probably going to go onto LinkedIn about this at some point. The reason they're saying projects are dead is because they think they can handle everything on a backlog. Now, you might have an organization with a big mature product and we are just, you know, evolving it, in which case maybe you don't have projects. But the truth is, when you've got to do something complicated, it's going to take 3 months, 6 months, it's going to cost some money, you've got to organize a back end, a front end, a business change. It's called a project. You can call it what you want. You can call it a banana, but it's actually a project, and you need to run it like a project. And that's why if you pick up a little post-it note and it says, you know, GDPR on it, and you think, oh, that's a 2-day task, you know, you got a big shock coming. And this is why we will always have projects, and we always need project managers, and we need to run them in the right way. Now, less projects, I'm okay with that, but no projects is a theoretical point that you know, I don't think you're going to get there. And all you need to do, actually, if you want to evidence it, Tony, is go and try and find something on somebody's backlog that's massive and see what it, you know, they normally go through the sort of sprints like a wrecking ball, and that's the proof of the pudding that you need to run projects as projects. Very interesting. A lot of people, I'll end on this, but a lot of people reference Spotify here. They say Spotify is the unproject company and they don't have projects. And it's just not true. For a start, if you listen to, I've forgotten the guru's name. He's really good though, his videos. But he talks about Spotify, and he talks about projects. And he said we still find them a problem. We still have them. We get people from Spotify come on our training courses in Agile project management. So if they're the on-project company, then they're still doing projects. If it's complicated, if it's unique, it's temporary, it's called a project. Use DSGM, AgilePM, or PRINCE2 Agile. You know, just get on with it and go for it. Right, I'm going to sign off now. There are some other questions, and we'll try to get to those. And we've got, I'll just give you the answer to the quiz question. And the bear was called Bungle, and a lot of you got that. And not many knew that the other 2 were called George and Zippy. And I've got some people saying Jeffrey here. So do you know who the first person to get it right was? I've got a name here, Paul Watson. You were the first one to get it right, so well done, Paul. Right, I'm going to sign off now. Hopefully you've enjoyed the webinar and got something from it. Email me, visit the website, do whatever you want. There is a recording of this webinar, so you know, if you want to move it on to friends or tell colleagues about it, and just let us know. There's a quick survey at the end, just very, very quick. I've enjoyed doing the webinar. It's been a while since I've done one, so I'm off to have a lie down. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, wherever you are in the world, and thank you very much for attending. Bye for now. Hang on, I'm still going. I haven't hit the exit button yet.